when is it okay to take from investments to fund abundance goals? We think we are ahead. We're about $3 million in investments. We're 34 years old and a $650K income. If we use $500K to buy a vacation home, would that be okay at this stage?
All right. Well, okay. So 34?
Yeah.
Yep.
With $3 million, making $650,000 a year, obviously you are in a very unique situation, right? Like you are very far out ahead of the curve, both in terms of assets that you have as well as your income. But even though most people might not find themselves in that exact scenario, I do think a lot of financial mutants ask the question, hey, I've been following the financial order of operations. By the way, we have a brand new food course coming out. If you haven't heard, you should check that out at learn.moneyguy.com. I've been following the FOO and I got to step 7 and I'm hyper accumulating and I've been building up my after-tax bucket, but like, man, when is it okay for me to use those dollars? Like, how do I know that I can start using some of those? And this is what I would encourage David, you to think about, as well as anyone else who's navigating this. Every financial decision that we make has a consequence. There's some opportunity cost to it. And in your example, you said, hey, I'm going to pull out $500,000 to go do something. Well, this is the exercise that you have to work through. Okay, if I take that $500,000 out of my portfolio, and my portfolio goes from $3 million down to $2.5 million, based on the way that I'm saving and the lifestyle that I live and the assets that I've accumulated, will I still be able to hit my other financial goals? Will I still be able to hit financial independence and pay for college and do all the different things that I may want to do as it relates to my financial priorities? If you can pull out the $500,000 and all those financial goals stay intact, I think that it's okay to do that. What I think happens for most people, though, is they see those dollars sitting there and they say, you know what, I really want to go buy that lake house, or I really want to go do that thing. And they end up cannibalizing something that was meant to be for financial independence, that was earmarked for your future self, and you begin consuming that today. And what you're not able to do in that scenario for a lot of folks is, I can't make up for that lost ground. Yeah, I might be able to use the lake house today and I'm going to have it there, but I'm not going to be able to hit my financial independence number. I'm not going to be able to get to where I needed to get to. So you have to look at your own situation and triage. If I were to pull these dollars off of the shelf, what else am I sacrificing, or what else might I have to give up by making that consumption decision today?
Well, I remind people they ought to do an expense audit. I mean, because you shared with us what your income was, you shared with us what your investments were, but I have no idea what your expenses are. Mm-hmm. And I would ask you to go create a budget to tell me what your expenses are, and then I want you to, when I say do an expense audit, I then want you to go take your income, back out the income taxes you had to pay last year, back out what you saved for retirement, and see what the net number is. Does it match what you think your expenses were? And a lot of times people are like, holy cow, I'm missing $100,000. Where, especially if you're in this high income, that's a leaky issue where you've got to figure out, where did that $100,000 go? Because you don't want to think your expenses are, $100,000 a year, and then you find out, no, you are actually spending a substantially more than that, because with big expenses come big obligations. If you have to have assets that can provide and replace that if you ever quit working. The other thing is that you have to ask yourself, when you go buy real estate and other things like that are especially real estate that's going to be a use asset, like a second home, your primary residence, is that, are these army of dollars that are sitting on your net worth statement, are they working? Or are they parked? Mm-hmm. Because I think a lot of people, my wife and I, we live in a crazy part of the country, and I see houses that are being sold for $4 million, $5 million, and I'm always like, do you realize the typical American, if you ask them what their aspirational goals, it's somewhere between typically $3 to $5 million. So
for financial independence?
So for financial independence, meaning that if you put that portfolio to work, that would provide you somewhere between $120 to $200 and over $200,000, depending upon where you are. That's a lot of expenses. But yet there are people that will go buy a $5 million house. And I think about the fact of, man, that money's not really, now yes, it could be appreciating, sure, but you have to sell the use asset to get those assets. Whereas if that money was working for you. So I just want to make sure you actually have enough army of dollars working, because if you go take $500,000 and put it towards a vacation property, that's once again another asset that's now It could be working through appreciation if you sell, but if this is going to be a house that you're buying for use to make memories, you want to pass it down to your children so you can have the grandkids, because that's where people think when they're building legacy. So don't just assume, because the only thing that caught me was that you were in your
early 30s.
Pretty early 30s. And I always worry, do you reached the critical mass that your money and your army of dollar bills that are working are big enough to provide and replace? Now, look, if you're still working until you're 65 years of age, you get a lot of grace there because it's assuming you're saving and investing and that money's growing. But if you think you're leaving the workforce like at 50 and you still have these goals of buying the vacation rental, the vacation property and all these other things, you might actually be behind. And that's why we do have a Know Your Number course, which is designed for people just like this situation. Go to learn.moneyguy.com, and you can actually put in your assets, you can put in your goals, and you can actually see, are you ahead of the curve, behind the curve, or right where you're supposed to be? That's why we designed it, is because you have all the blessings and opportunities to be extremely successful. You just have to make sure you're not pulling too many levers that you consume before you really have the critical mass point. Now, look, y'all, if you've read Millionaire Mission, I'm big that money is only a tool. So I want you to maximize your 20s. I want you to maximize your 30s. I want you to maximize your 40s. But I just don't want you to get ahead of yourself to where you really get yourself in a pickle of a situation down the road.